A little bit of a glitch there, technology. 1 second, Tosin will just be back with us. And so welcome everybody. My name is Chinedu Umba, and I am the chair of the steering committee for the Jacksonites Professional Development Series. We are honored to have you here with us. Whilst we wait for our moderator to get back online, I'd like to say that this is a workshop we're holding because you asked for it after the seminar we just had. And we have the same presenters. For this session, it's going to be a deep dive. And we're hoping that you've had a chance to actually watch the recording, think about the homework that you were given, because it is what you bring to this session that will determine how much you take away from it. And so now Tosin is back. I'll hand it over back to Tosin. Tosin? Tosin, do you want to unmute? Okay, Tosin, you've unmuted.
All right, sorry for the break in transmission. I'm experiencing some technical hitches here. I hope it stays good. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Like Professor Chinedu has rightly explained, this is a workshop that is a continuation of the 3rd edition of the JPDS seminar we had on the 23rd of March 2022. And in this workshop, we have same presenters of who our presenters are. The lead speaker is Professor Charles Okigbo, who is a professor emeritus from the North Dakota State University, North Dakota. He handled the last time a topic called effective fundraising and capital campaign as strategic communication. We also had Professor Bartho Okolo, who was a former vice chancellor of the prestigious University of Nigeria, Nsukka, an accomplished fundraiser, who spoke extensively on relationship in trying to get your fundraising to be a success. We had Mr. John Klocke, who comes with over 30 years of experience in fundraising, a professional in healthcare fundraising and social services. He is the current director of advancement at St. John Paul II Catholic Schools, Fargo. He also presented a paper titled Professor Sandra Adamu, professor of broadcasting from Ahmadu Bello University, shared with us some case studies.
Tosin, you're muted again.
Want to take control. Wow.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right. I would like to thank you. Professor Chinedu, you are doing very well. At any point in time, if I go off, kindly take over. Thank you. Now, I'd like to read the house rules for everyone here. Number one, it's important that we take control of our environment while the presentations are going on. Please endeavor to be muted. Number two, when you need to ask a question, please do that by indicating and you will be duly recorded. Try to keep your questions, comments, and contribution brief and straight to the point. Once again, I welcome you to the workshop of the 3rd edition of the JPDS series. And we titled it Fundraising and Capital Campaigns in Higher Education. So like they say in America, let's cut to the chase. Let's get to the business of the Mr. John Klocke, who will be. Is Mr. John Klocke available now?
I am available, yes. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me, Professor Chinedu? Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Mr. John Klocke will be delivering his paper. I want everyone to get ready, have your pen, your paper available. This is a man that comes with so much experience. And we had an exciting time with him the last time. And I'm sure it's even going to be deeper as he delves into the nitty-gritty of fundraising. Mr. John Klocke, you're welcome. Over to you now.
All right, thank you. I am going to try to get my presentation here. It will just take me one moment. Can you now see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is John Klocke, and I am currently a fundraiser, director of advancement.
We can see your computer.
Can you see my presentation?
Screen.
Yep.
Yeah, but the presentation paper is yet so visible. Yes. Now we can see. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, it's great to be here with you again. As you remember my past presentation, fundraising is not asking for money. I gave you homework at that meeting, and it really is the type of homework that we all need to do as fundraisers to prepare for the work that we do so that we can be as efficient and as quick as possible in accelerating the outcomes of all of the work that we are doing. So today my presentation is to go over the preparations that I assigned during your homework period. And really these preparations can be utilized for if you're beginning a new program of fundraising. They certainly can be utilized as preparation for a capital campaign. In fact, I would look at them as an informal feasibility study for a capital campaign, so that as we move forward and make our plans, we have a little bit better idea of the sorts of results that we are currently getting and that we've gotten in the past from our current group of donors, so that it can lead us in the right direction. So the last time I talked about what gets measured gets managed. And so we're going to look at, your homework was to measure the past 3 years, measuring these things. What was the total number of donors each year that gave to your organization? And I hope that you've had the time to kind of look over some of these. We also talked about what was the total number of gifts to your organization. And this is for all of the funds that you may raise money for and all of the different projects. We also looked at what was the average gift size. And we'll talk about each of these items and what they mean. Then we also talked about the most popular fund or purpose that your constituents can give to. This tells you a lot also about where you are currently with your donors and what education may be needed for new fundraising efforts for new purposes. And then finally, we talked about the 80-20 relationship, which as we will talk about again today, is a huge tool for all of us to use. Basically, in a nutshell, the adage has been that we tend to receive 80% of the funds that we raise from 20% of our donors. And we've even talked about in the United States how that is even changing to be an even smaller relationship. For instance, 10% of donors giving us 90% of the funds that we raise, and it even can get less than that. But today we're going to look at the 80-20. So I hope you've had a chance to look at what the top 20% of your donors this past year have contributed to your organization, to see what percent of your total giving is there. By going through all of these areas that I have on the slide, you'll start to determine where some of your strengths and weaknesses lie. And it will point you in the direction to the types of preparation that you may need to do as you build and grow either a fundraising program or prepare for a major capital campaign. In fact, I think of this as really as I said, that beginning feasibility study for whatever you're embarking on. So I've chosen to do the homework as well, using my organization's numbers. So I'm digging in there with you so that I can kind of use my homework to show you what that looks like for our organization. We are just one organization. We are a system of 5 Catholic schools based in Fargo, North Dakota. We have 3 elementary schools. We have a middle school and a high school. And so these are the groups that I am studying and what we do all of the advancement and fundraising work for. So first of all, we looked at the total number of donors. If you look at in 2021, we had 1,673 donors give to our organization. If I go back a year, we had 1,273 donors give to us last year. And in 2019, going back 3 years, we had 1,330 donors give to us. So the information that we look at with that is we're looking at a general trend. Is it going generally up or is it generally going down? And there are many factors that are controlling that. We're going to talk about several of those factors. This tells us about the giving health of our organization. It really tells us if we've got momentum going in the right direction. And of course, looking at my numbers and possibly knowing the list of my potential donor database, this also tells me what percentage of my database are currently contributing. This could help me set up an overall goal to increase the number and the higher percentage of people who are active with our charity. In our case, we have probably close to 15,000 donors. So you can see that we have about roughly 10% of our donors active with us. We all want to make that number bigger for our organizations. So I would ask you, what trends do you observe in these numbers with your own numbers and with the numbers that I am sharing? I'll give you a second to sort of think about that. And you certainly can chat or raise your hand if you have a question that relates to that. You might also be wondering and asking yourself, how many donors are we asking in order to accomplish these numbers? And I can tell you that it's a great percentage of our database that are solicited each year. And so we need to ask ourselves, are we asking enough donors that we are currently connected to? And how often are we asking them? So we look at what percentage of our donors give. How many donors are we asking? And then we need to look at the frequency of our asking. There is a phenomenon called donor fatigue that all charities can experience, and that is when we have asked our donors more frequently than they want to be asked. And when we look at our program being a donor-centered program, we really need to pay attention to what our donors are saying about the number of times that we are asking, because that is important. And that also, you know, we might not be asking often enough or too often. This is some of the things that you'll need to study and track every year. I do this tracking every year for our charity because I'm looking to see what is changing and what is happening with our donors. Are we losing folks, and are we asking often enough? And then also I need to look at how we are asking our donors. What are the different ways? And when we use direct mail, and I've just added this one as an example, in the United States, when we send out a direct mailing piece, we know that statistically about 75% of folks never open the envelope. I know that sounds hard to believe, and that makes direct mail in some ways, you know, cost prohibitive. But we can make the envelope and other factors to that mailing inviting to the people who will receive it. In our case, we often will put something on the front of the envelope. Recently, we did an impact mailing, and on the outside of the envelope, we told folks that there's a special report just for them inside of the envelope. And we do everything we can. Sometimes we change the type of envelope. We make it look more like an invitation envelope, or we change the color of the envelope. We try to change things often enough so that people are invited to open the envelope. And of course, we know that direct mail is only one part of how we raise money. We are making personal asks one-to-one. We are now using email. We even have sometimes links on social media for people to make gifts. We have newsletters where we may invite people in a story and have an inserted envelope or a card inside of the newsletter or the magazine. There are many, many different ways that we can ask. So we have to factor in all of those ways that we might ask. And once we've looked at how many donors are participating, then we need to look at the number of gifts per donor that we receive every year. And this was your next homework assignment. So I'll share with you that for our charity in 2019, we had 3,318 people, 3,318 gifts given by 1,330 donors. So that's an average of about 2.5 gifts per donor. In 2020, the number of our gifts went down to 2,800. And then the number of donors also decreased. So now we had 2.2 gifts per donor. And in 2021, the number of our gifts went back up, and so did the number of donors. But when you do that calculation, we still had a decrease in the number of gifts per donor. This is a very important measurement. This is the measurement that really allows you to see, first of all, how many are participating and how often they are participating. As charities, we want to not fatigue our donors, so we need to make sure that we're doing the right things in between their gifts so that we are doing the non-ask communications. So we are seeing a decline in the number of gifts per donor, but as you look at all of the different types of data, you'll see that that doesn't tell the whole story. But it will tell us if people are giving less or more gifts. And it also kind of helps us to reinforce whether we're asking too often or not often enough. And then, as I mentioned just a second ago, in between every ask for a gift, what we aim for here is to do 5 to 7 non-ask communications between our asks. If we don't do that, then we may hear the things that we've sometimes heard that, gosh, it seems like the only time they ever contact me is when they want money. If I had $1 million for every time I've heard that over the years, we'd have all of our goals met. And that's a very common problem with many different charities, is that all we do is ask. We might send a simple thank you, but there's so much more that we could be doing. In fact, we could even ask less often and have more giving. It just depends. We all have to find that right amount. And then are we asking at different times of the year, and are we asking at the right time of the year? For all of us, there may be a season where people give to us more frequently. There may be seasons of the year where people tend not to give. And we also need to look at each individual donor, especially for our major donors. Look at their giving history. Do they always give at the same time of the year? Sometimes they're telling us exactly how they want to be asked and when they want to be asked. They're telling us from history how that works for them. If we don't pay attention to that, they understand that we're not paying attention. In today's world, we are seeing a trend, and at least in the United States, we see a trend where people used to give, 20 years ago, used to give to many more charities. Now, donors are giving to a shorter list of charities, but they're giving them higher amounts of giving. Our goal as a nonprofit is to give them the kind of communication, the kind of recognition, the kind of impact report that makes them want to keep our organizations on their shorter list. We also have to continually be asking new donors in any way we can to add to our pool of donors every year. If we don't, this will always lead to a decline. There is a model that some people will ask the same group of people every year, and if they don't give, they won't ask that person the next year. They'll just ask the people that give, and that number will decline over time. And so we need to be always asking new people, and we need to always be communicating in between gifts in order to really help our donors realize the importance of their gift. We also need to look at factors going on in our country or our community that might cause people to give less or to give more. In the United States last year, we had quite a bit of economic stimulus funding that happened during the pandemic. And we were concerned that giving might go down. But in essence, many people received this extra stimulus, and we actually saw giving go up in terms of the amount of giving. It could be, there could be a stock market decline, there could be other factors going on, there could be unrest or uncertainty, there could be war, there could be many things that cause our donors to be uncertain. So if we're planning a capital campaign, again, we need to assess this factor as well. Are there any reasons why people might not be as conducive to making a major gift? So before we start our campaigns, we should look at all of the factors. The next thing that we should always look at is what were the most popular projects donors gave to. It's sort of like a donor survey. We need to find out what they enjoy giving to, because if we have a capital campaign that's related to what they most like to give to, that's great. And that giving kind of tells us through the giving appeals what they're interested in giving. But what if we want them to give to something that doesn't appeal to them? What do we need to do then? That is where part of our strategic planning, we need to educate them about that new fund or that new project. And if they've told us through their past giving, let me use the example here at our schools. They want to give to the success of young people. But now we're building a building. What does that do for young people? We need to connect them to what they already appreciate in their giving plans and connect that to the new project that we have going on. So finding out what people give to and what projects are most popular does tell us something. I also had you look at your average gift size. And so I did a study of ours. In 2019, I took all of the gifts and I averaged them all just as a raw average by the number of donors. And in 2019, our average gift per donor was $508. In 2020, the average gift went to $744. And in 2021, the average gift went to $1,466. And you might be saying, well, that is quite a jump. And how did that really happen? Well, it talks back to that 80-20 ratio that I talked about. This past year, if you look at the top 20% of our donors to see how much they contributed, and you looked at yours, what did you find? For us, I found that in 2021, a total of $5,143,000 was raised for our charity. So then I separated out the top 20% of our donors, which for us was 396 people. That 396 people gave $4,957, $957 and $236, or 96% of all giving. Isn't that amazing? That is telling us one big strategy. Those 396 people are for sure the people that you should spend 80% of your time with, to make sure that you cultivate the giving potential of the folks that have the greatest capability to give. Today's donors, as I said, are more selective about how many charities that they are going to support. And so we really need to make sure that we're doing a good job of communicating with all of the folks. And I'm going to just turn my page here because I want to share one other thing with you. When we talk about how to make sure that we keep those top donors with our organization, those 5 to 7 non-ask communications per year are critical. I would suggest that you pick up the phone every day and call one of those people in that top donor group. Strike up a conversation, give them information, let them know how their gifts are working for your organization. Let them know how thankful you are to them. This one strategic idea is a huge idea. You're not necessarily asking for money, but you're just thanking them and making them feel good about the gift that they gave. I would also suggest a handwritten personal note during the year. And I would have that note come from somebody perhaps on their board, perhaps the president of your organization, perhaps it might be the development director, or it might be somebody that is well known to everybody in the community that supports that organization. So handwritten notes are very important. If you have an annual event or two, make sure that these top folks are involved with that event. You might even be honoring them at one of these events and thanking them again publicly for all that they do. And in the United States, we use a lot of giving honor lists that we send out to our donors every year that allow all of our donors to see what our different levels of giving are and how many people are in our different giving levels. We also pay good attention to those that do not want to be listed in public listings as well. That is also important to remember. But the more that we can communicate and work with these 396 donors in our case, the better chance that we have. So what do we do with the other 80% of the donors? For those 80%, we still use all of the other methods that are more of a mass communication effort. It might be our magazines, our newsletters. We can still send out handwritten notes to people who are at the next level of giving. We can even still do phone calls to people that have the capability to move to the next level. Oftentimes, our biggest obstacle is this all takes time, and we need to have enough time to reach folks. In the United States, you'll see many charities, especially in higher education, that will assign a major gift officer to 150 people. So if you look at this number of 396, you could make a good case that there should be a couple of gift officers. And I can tell you from experience that every experienced gift officer that you assign to 150 people will increase, if they are well trained, will increase the amount that you can raise every year, and they will return far more than your investment. That's why you see in colleges 20, 30, 40, even 100 or more gift officers on staff. And that's why these colleges raise 100, 200 million per year. There are more people working. We all don't have those capabilities, but that is another strategy, is making sure that you have adequate staff resources to make this happen. So what do we do with our 80-20 data? This is the core of your program, as I've mentioned. These are the folks that you want to make sure you're spending lots of time with, especially if you have a capital campaign coming up. These are the folks that you will talk to do a feasibility study to see what they think about your ideas for your capital projects. They will tell you if they are interested, and that gives you sort of a pre-ask to know that you have people who are interested. These folks need the most personalized, non-ask communications over the next year to steward them and to retain them. And these are the things that I've mentioned that you can do: a well-written thank you note, one or more personal handwritten notes, an annual impact report, periodic newsletters, a personal visit or two, a once-a-year stewardship event, and make sure that these very top donors meet your president and your board chair. Make sure that there are meetings going on to connect them. People want to know that their giving is so valued that you want them to meet with your top administration. And then you have to add to this core group by working all of these methods to get more people to move up to this top donor group. So those are some of the notes as I studied the homework that I gave to you. That is some of the things that I wanted to share with you about ours. And I'd love to hear any questions you might have or any thoughts, or if anybody wants to share what they've done at their charity, I'm all ears for that as well. And I thank you for your time in presenting how this homework can be used. Kelson? That is the end of my presentation.
A good time to ask questions if you did your homework. So we'll, Tosin, are you there? Okay, so thank you very much, John. It was good to see you operationalize that homework. And I'm sure for many of us, we'll be able to take that away and do the same with ours. And if you have questions with regards to John's presentation, you can put your questions or your comments in the chat, and then we'll take it from there. And so we're going to go on to our next presenter for today, and that would be Professor Adamu from Zaria, ABU Zaria. And oh, we've got a question. Sani, forgive me. Sani Ahmed Yuta, do you want to ask your question? You can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, good evening. My questions is how do we identify potential donors in our local environment? Looking at the fact that, for example, in our states, we have about 3 universities, 2 polytechnics, 3 colleges of education, and all of them will, be looking at one donor or the other in order to assist the environment. And we have very few of them, that can be able to donate, to the university. So my question is, how do we now identify potential donors for upcoming universities, more especially in the northern Nigeria, northern part of the country?
That's a good question, and what there are different methods of doing that. In our charity here in the United States, we use a software tool, and we use that for our own
Go ahead,
donors.
John.
Yes.
No, continue. Could you please mute if you're not speaking? John, please go ahead.
Okay. We use a software that has built into it a research option, and it helps direct us to folks who might not be currently contributing who are on our list, but it shows us that here is somebody who has great capability to contribute, but they currently are not. And so I use that as a tool to start building new relationships to people who aren't in my top donor group. That also has a function, and this is Razor's Edge NXT software that we use. And it is a wonderful tool because it will allow us to find people in our community who we should be striking up a relationship with. And of course, we aren't just digging for gold, if you will. We are actually building friendships and building relationships. The best way that you can find new people is to have a community-wide event and really, sell your mission also through print materials, and have opportunities for people to connect with you either as volunteers, as donors, as maybe somebody who can be on a committee to help your charity. There are many different ways, but it does take a lot of creativity. So if you have less donors, one other way that I use is I look at the gift lists of other charitable organizations to see if there's somebody, and these are just public lists that you can usually find online. And I look to see at another university, where is their giving list? And sometimes you will be able to see the public list where people have agreed to put their name out there, and you'll see, well, that's somebody that we know, but we've never reached out to them. So there are lots of ways to do it. We want to have the highest ethical standards for doing that, but it does take some creativity. But I find that community-wide donor events that have a topic or a theme that's of interest to the whole community is one way to gather people for a meal or some sort of event, so that the folks from your organization can present the good work that the charity is doing, and hopefully capture the names of those folks who attend the event and add them to your mailing list. I know it's difficult when there's not a lot of donors, but that's one approach that I would use. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. I was able to get something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Thank you, John.
And before you go, Mr. Klocke, I would like to find out, how does one overcome the... Yeah, you want to expatiate on that?
You cut out, Tosin. You cut out. You want to repeat the question?
Yes. During your presentation, Mr. Klocke, you spoke about the donor fatigue, and I think it's a bad time for anyone who wants to run a fundraising. How does one circumvent that? How do you go about ensuring that does not affect your plan?
That's a very good question, and that gets to the 5 to 7 non-ask communications. If you are able to do that for all of your donors, and that takes, often it can take over the course of a 6-month or a 12-month period to do that. That will keep your donors from being fatigued. but that doesn't mean that you can't have indirect asks, maybe perhaps something in a newsletter or something on social media where it's not a direct ask to them by mail or in person, so that other opportunities are placed before them. But I would really not place more opportunities before them until you have done a lot of the non-ask communications. And here's what I do. I'll just give you a very quick nutshell. Somebody makes a gift to our organization. We send them a proper thank you and receipt for their gift. 30 days later, I send them a handwritten note and thank them for their gift. About 30 days after that, I give them a call to let them know how their gift has impacted our organization. Another 30 days after that, they might receive a magazine from us talking about our organization. In between there, we also will have had one or more events that they are invited to. And we thank them again at those events, and we don't ask them for money, although once in a while there might be a ticket price and they might pay something for that event. But we try to get sponsors to pay for the event so that they can come and enjoy a good meal without price, and we can thank them again. And then I might send them another personal handwritten note or make another phone call. I might ask if I can visit with them in person to give them an update on the organization. If I do all of those things before I ask for the next gift, there will be zero donor fatigue.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Klocke. Well explained, well appreciated. Somebody asked a question while you were explaining this. He wanted to know, how do you handle a donor that has too many questions to ask you before you can pass you this money? How do you handle such donor?
Too many questions?
Too many questions. He's bombarding you with many questions, and the gentleman who is asking the question probably had an experience in the past in that regard. So how do you handle such donors?
Well, it is a challenge, and it is the one way that we can sell that donor more than any other donor on our organization, by providing service above and beyond the normal. And so it does take patience, and I love that when people have lots of questions for me, because I'm staying connected to that person. So in one way, that's a gift that they are still reaching out and connecting. And often when you take that time to do that, they appreciate that so much. And we all know we have some folks that we do have that situation, but most of the time we don't. So that's a chance to have a donor get closer to you because you have given them extra service. And that will usually always be a positive return for your time.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Klocke. Yeah, I think you handled it well. I can't see any other question here at this point. Can we quickly proceed to the next speaker, Mr. Klocke?
There's one quick question, sorry, Tosin. The last question from Dr.
Okay.
Nwarem, and then after that, we'll go on to
Okay, go ahead.
Professor Adamu. Do you want me to read it?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, so it says,
Yes,
hi,
please go
John.
ahead.
Thanks for the lecture. It's quite helpful. My question is, if I am not part of the team that handles issues of donation in my institution, but I am interested in it, how would this be handled? So I'm not a member of the fundraising team, but I'm interested. How do I get myself in?
Well, that might be more of an organizational internal question, but I would definitely share my interest with the fundraising team, and I would give them some good reasons for why I'd like to be informed. And it also speaks to what we do here as having an annual report. And that annual report gives lots of sorts of information about how much we raise. And it makes our organization very transparent to all of our staff and to all of our donors. And I would advise that as well. In fact, we have donor lists of everybody who gave in a year. We never do talk about, you know, specific amounts that somebody gave, unless that donor has wanted us to inspire others with their gift. But we do an annual report, and we share that with everybody who wants it. And so I would suggest that is probably the best way. But also, if I was the person, I would raise my hand and say, I'd like to help raise money in any way I can, but I don't know what's happening. Is there anything you can share with me? I would just directly ask. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. Tosin,
Yeah,
over to you.
Thank you, Miss. All right, thank you so very much. Professor Chinedumba, you've done a yeoman's job here. Thank you very much for that. All right, at this point, I'd like to call on the next speaker, Professor Sandra Adamo, a professor of broadcasting from Ahmadu Bello University, who will be taking us further into quite a number of case studies to further give us clear understanding of how to go about the concept of fundraising. Professor Ladi Adamu, are you there? Yes, I can see you. You're welcome. Over to you now. Yes, we can see your slides on the screen, but we can't hear you yet.
You're muted. You want to mute yourself, Prof?
Mute. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, but you need to mute the other device. You have two devices on, I think.
Yes.
So there's feedback coming from one. Can mute one and then leave the other on. Yeah, okay.
Mute
That's
one
better.
and okay.
So mute one. Now you've muted the wrong one. Mute the other one. Okay. Or move away from one. You can move away from one but you're muted right now. Unmute yourself. Do you want me? Okay, so excellent. Now you muted yourself. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Greetings, everybody. I hope you are all doing fine. Yeah, I'm sitting. The light is not very bright, but I hope you can see me.
Yes, we
Professor,
can.
please, there is an echo coming from one of your devices. Is it possible we switch the other device off? We're getting this big echo.
Okay.
One of the devices probably is creating the glitching.
Okay, I'll switch it off.
Yes. Please do.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay, just 1 second. Technology has its moments, and so we'll just be a little patient. And so what's going to happen is right after Professor Adamu delivers her piece, there's going to be time for you to ask more questions. And then after that, we'll go on to having Professor Sassi and Professor Okibo deliver theirs. I'd like to use this occasion to wish our Muslim brothers and sisters a happy Eid Mubarak. You better save some ram meat for me. And there's a virtual way of sending it along. I'll be happy to receive it, but God bless you all as you celebrate. Professor Adamu, are you ready? Could we, did she suddenly disappear? Okay. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is if Professor Okolo, are you ready? Sorry to get you on earlier. Is she back? Okay, so Professor Okolo,
Yeah,
do you mind stepping in and presenting yours now?
okay, that is all right.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing hers, and once she's ready. All right. So Tosin, do you want to take over and introduce Professor Okolo properly?
All right, thank you so very much, Professor. All right. You're welcome, Professor Okolo. I want to use this opportunity to introduce you to our participants. Professor Bartho Okolo is an accomplished fundraiser and the former Vice Chancellor of University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Professor Okolo has over 30 years experience in the raising funds. From his vast experience, he's been able to raise donation running into billions. Today, he'll be sharing with us some of his ideas in the areas of fundraising. Professor Bartho Okolo, you're welcome once again.
Thank you very much, Tosin.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, participants.
And 1 second, and I'll share your slides now, Professor Okolo.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yes, loud
can.
and clear, Professor.
Yeah, okay. The last time around, I tried to describe the general principles of strategic fundraising. I actually prefer to call it resource mobilization, but because fundraising is actually more than just funds. There are resources that are measured in different dimensions. So today, I want to take some specific examples of fundraising activities that we did, and then explain it so that you can see the step-by-step processes we went to get to the successes. Next slide, please. At this point, I will just try to do a recap to show us that fundraising, benefits of fundraising is not just receiving money or receiving funds. There are other things that are huge benefits to the institutions beyond cash making. And these include that it helps the institution to clearly articulate its strategic plan, because that's part of the research work that is done at the background by the team. It also helps to increase the visibility of the institution, because in the process of doing promotions for a particular fundraising and contacting high net worth individuals, the visibility of the industry is further expanded. The industry also benefits from a larger contact network and benefit from advice from all these contacts and benefactors. The university also leverages those benefactors and their networks. And more importantly, the university is liberated from its financial entanglements due to the shortfalls in core funding. Apart from the morale boosting and the profile raising that is obtainable when huge funds are imputed into a university system, for development that everybody sees and impacts on both the students and the community. Next slide. Now, the first action in such fundraising is the team building. In our own process, my chief executive invited me that he has heard about my capacity to do some of these type of things, that he wants me to lead the fundraising for a media games, which the fundraising my university is hosting. And we agreed that I will make some input in the caliber of people that will be appointed as members of the committee. So we sat together and decided, based on the areas that are considered important for expanding the activities of the committee for the fundraising of the team. And then the appointments letters are written out. With me as chairman or coordinator or whatever name is given. The other thing is that people are appointed based on their level of integrity, based on their youthfulness, social connections, and character. So once the team is formed and appointed like so, the inaugural meeting now you begin to articulate all the various areas that you need to address in order to achieve the strategic results. Like you need an advertising and promotions committee, subcommittee. You need a committee that will be involved in management of the finances. You need a committee that will manage all sorts of things. And then we sit together and then enlist all those committees and decide who chairs what. Putting round pegs in round holes. And after that, we move to the next important area, which is research. Next slide, please. The background research, like we talked the other time, sometimes it's depending on the type of fundraising and the volume of the funds expected. It can take between 6 months and 2 years or 3 years because a lot of research needs to be done. You need to articulate the strategic needs for that specific fundraising and prioritize those strategic needs. You have to design for each of those projects the needs, campaigns or initiatives. Each of them, the ones that require civil designs, you need to create the designs and do the costing for the projects and for the initiatives or campaigns. Then you need to create options for different donor categories. Because some projects will cost $1 billion. It's not every person that can afford $1 billion or $1 billion naira. You can break them down to projects that can cost between 100 million and 500 million, so that you can reach a wider donor category. And then the next step will be started to justify the needs for all the specific campaigns, all the specific projects and initiatives. Why does the university need it? Is it going to be part of the games? Is it going to be part of the learning process and learning facilities for the students? Is it going to be part of the infrastructure needed for development of the university going forward? So you have to pick needs and justify the need for each of those projects and those initiatives. we also need to prove impact of those projects on either the community or the general society or the students. I already talked about providing options, various options for different categories of donors. And after that, we started diarizing, listing potential donors and diarizing them. There are donors from different groups. There are general philanthropists, there are alumni, there are government institutions and private sector organizations. Categorize them and enlist them in the diary of potential donors. And after that, this is what the entire team will sit back and do over a long period of time in order to develop appropriate strategy to effectively raise the required resources. So the next step will be to research the donor passion. Some of these donors have their various passions, depending on their background or their experience. Some people want to immortalize their father or their parents who specialize in specific areas or who are very much interested in one thing or the other. So we need to go back to study the passion of each of those potential good donors, especially those that fall within the 20% that gives the most of the money. So we research their passion, we research their expectations, we research their needs. Because apart from, I said earlier that capital campaign fundraising has become a science. It is no longer a simple philanthropy. So those people who are going to donate these resources to you, they also have needs. So you need to research their needs. Research if they are running companies, if they are doing one thing or the other, research it and see whether there are any ways the university can also help them, assist them in anywhere the university can also assist them in their own projects. So these are part of the necessary research aspects that we need to do before the relationship. And after that, we begin to contact the donors. I'm still on 4, please. So we begin to contact the donors. They would have enlisted many donors, hundreds, thousands of donors. Then we have to share them amongst those who knows who and who knows who. And we begin to get to contact them. If we don't know them, we find out who knows them very closely that can influence their thoughts and their capacity to do anything. Once you find the people who are close to them, then you meet them and then they can take you to them. So these are simple strategies for donor contact processes. After that, we do the development of reward mechanisms. Because the donors, when they give you those resources, you need to be rewarded for their philanthropy. What type of reward do they want? Some people don't want their names to be mentioned. Some people want to secretly give. How else can you reward them, make them feel happy and feel that you appreciate the donation? The research that we need to do at the background before, and then for each of the donors, research what type of reward he will want. Does he want the project to be named after him? Does he want the project his name to be put in a Hall of Fame? How does he want to be rewarded? For each and every other, he's painstaking. And then also we try to form very strong corporate partnerships. This particular one helped us in our own legal games because we got the entire private sector of Nigeria to form a group and came together to assist us with huge successes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Are you there? Yeah. So after the research, then we begin to engage in the relationships, to cultivate the relationship with each of the individual donors and the even partner, the corporate organization. So this relationship cultivation continues not just during the initial contact, but we continues during soliciting and after they have made activated their donations. The last speaker also mentioned how in their own situation they had to write almost virtually every month to the donor to thank him in various ways, invite him to activities and all that. These are some of the processes that you have to go through to ensure that you maintain active donor relationship. Another way to maintain the donor relationship, especially when the donation has been activated, is to make sure that you update the donor on the projects and the development of the project. And projects are actually implemented transparently. Public recognitions of the donor efforts and invitation to institutional ceremonies and dinners and activities. Progress of updates in university development and the projects. Sometimes it might be necessary to take photographs of the projects at special times and then send to the donor videos and photographs so that he appreciates the progress of the work. Next slide, please. Another very important area of the strategy is advertising, marketing, and promotion. This is your area, this is your treasury. You can appreciate it even more than me. But you know that promotions activate people to the donation process. When you promote a function or an event, you get to a point where people are excited to be part of that project. So that's what the promotions do. And then branding also have a similar effect. Advertisements will raise resources for you. And what we did in our own case was that we had to engage professionals, a whole lot of Dakinites from the seat of advertising in Lagos to handle most of these areas for us. The creation of memorabilia and investment and all that. Next slide. Now, let me talk about a few of the projects that we did. This process that I went through now from slide number 3 to number 6 is exactly the same process for each and every one of them. Very small differences. But let me just isolate a few of the projects and tell you how we went about them. Now, there is this Medical Diagnostic and Wellness Center that costs about 500 million naira. everybody who is around Nigeria will appreciate that the medical services are not still good. And any good medical infrastructure and facility will attract clientele. And so we try to upgrade our medical center in our campus in Adamu, do the design, very good design that will cost about 200. And then we did this diagnostic center because most people, that is, most of the time you have overseas medical trips, is medical tourism, they call it, is going for diagnostic tests and all that across Europe and Asia. But if you have those equipments and the experts within our client in Nigeria, there's no reason why we should be traveling out of the country for such things. We have very, very well-trained experts in various aspects of medical sciences. And so we articulated this initiative and confronted the chairman of with these two projects, because we have done the relationship background studies and found out his passion to give the things that will benefit humanity. And so we articulated the medical diagnosis center will have almost all the state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment. And there is a wellness center, physiotherapy equipment and specialists. And try to arrange with a huge medical organization, international medical organization, to partner with us in implementing the program in the city center, so that people can come from all walks of life, all around Nigeria, outside Nigeria, West Africa, East Africa, and beyond for such treatment and investigation. And after showing him the two projects, the medical center development cost about 317 million, but we built the medical diagnosis center. The civil works alone will cost 500 million. After explaining this, we chose to take the higher one, which will impact on more people, which will create more visibility for the university and for the country. And so the project is almost being completed. Another project was the water project for the university that cost about 465 million. Usually students have problems at work and buying water from water tankers and all that. And we thought it wasn't, since 20% it wasn't appropriate, it wasn't proper to allow that. And then we met with the governor, who was an alumnus of the University of Nigeria. And we confronted him, told him that these are the problems that we have in the university. Our students don't have water. The laboratories need to operate properly, and they cannot operate without water and others. After explaining the whole thing, he was touched. And as governor of the state and as alumnus of the university, he was so very happy and willing to commit to donating resources for the water project is implemented, 655 million. It's not funny in the Nigerian context. So it depends, a whole lot depends on the approach, on the justification of the needs, and the selection of the projects and the impact of the projects. There are so many others, like the 1 billion from the national budgets for legal games. When the legal games gets up, you have to find somebody that is close to the management of the National Assembly. And then we go to them, explain the problems to them. You cannot believe how willing these men are ready to engage in this type of investments. Once they are convinced that they are necessary, there's need for them, and that they can impact on the community, and there will not be abuse of the resources they commit, most of these people commit. So that was how we got that. I'm just talking about just a few of them. There's so many of them. I told you, we raised many, many, many billions within that period. Next slide, please. There are challenges. It is not as easy. It wasn't as easy as I was just saying. There are challenges along the line. There are setbacks. First of all, because it is not new. We are, in our environment, in the Nigerian environment, fundraising is quite a new initiative. Most of the resources are provided for things to be done. It is the scarcity of resources recently that has made people to begin to look for alternatives. So there's a dearth of staff who are adroit in such fundraising activities and skills. The global economic recession is one of the major things with the setbacks and the challenges, because it's the lack of resources, particularly the core funding resources, that has made people to start looking for extra resources to increasing competition for donors. Now, because many more universities and institutions are needing and looking for these donations, usually from a particular group of people, the competition will now begin to affect the volume and the effectiveness of the strategies of fundraising. The last week I also mentioned, that's John Klocke mentioned some of the things that can mitigate against the donor fatigue. Donor fatigue, I don't think donor fatigue has a solution. Okay, if many people are confronting or are engaging a particular group of people for resources every year and every year and every year, even though they are willing to give, the resources will be depleted, and the ability, the capacity to give will also go down. And so, donor fatigue is a very, very important setback in the process of fundraising, and evolving donor expectations and fundraising preferences. All those changes will also affect it. One of the major setbacks, I will also call it a challenge in fundraising in higher institutions, is what I may describe as sabotage. Sabotage, you will not believe it. Some people will not want that progress, and then they will go behind and tell them, please don't give this away this month. They don't need it, they will misappropriate it, blah, 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 and tell us. And then sometimes the people they told will call you because they know you and they know that you are somebody of integrity, and they say, see what your people are doing. But it is possible it happens. That is a major setback in our society in particular, in fundraising activity. So that is where I will stop. And if there are any questions, then I can handle them in more detail.
Thank you so very much, Prof. Thank you so very much. Quite detailed. You've been able to dwell on the practical areas of fundraising here, and we could see how much of experience you've brought to bear. So much comments came in there that your presentation was quite inspiring there. Thank you very much, Prof. Now, I just want you to, speaking of, we keep talking about the donor fatigue, and I'm sure in the next presentation, Professor Professor Charles Okigbo, the last time spoke about how to discover new guys who are the new kids on the block, as they say, new people who have deep pockets who will be willing to give. I think that is one area where one could move around the concept of donor fatigue. Like rightly said, if one keeps going to the same source, then it's just a matter of time. You know, when the resources are depleted, nothing much can be done. But once we can begin to spread our tentacles to newer billionaires and millionaires, there probably we will not be limited by the concept of donor fatigue. Thank you very much once more, Professor. You've done very well. We've been able to, you've impacted us tremendously. Thank you very much. At this point, I want to get across to Professor Ladi Adamo, in case you are around. Maybe we'll quickly take yours before we go to Professor Okigbo and Professor Sasi. Professor Ladi Adamo, are you around? Would you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Professor. We hope technology will cooperate with you. Thank you very much, Professor. Let's go. All right.
I had to change my sitting position.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. Maybe the previous speakers have greeted you on Salah, the Eid. So I'll just go straight to my paper. This time around, my topic changed a little bit, but it's still the same. Fundraising campaign for higher institutions in Nigeria. And my topic is fundraising in higher institutions and the place of multimedia strategies. Yeah, so that's the topic. I started off with what exactly it is to raise funds for the development of higher institutions, particularly in Nigeria. So fundraising is the practice of raising money to support educational enrichment programs by schools or school groups. That's the refresher. Can we go to the next slide? How do we engage in fundraising? We actually, the how, number one, is in addition to what others have said, we engage the alumni, the parent-teachers associations, use of creative words to raise funds through aggressive advertising, grant writing, straightforward donation requests. As we'll be discussing, you will see what I mean by straightforward donation requests. Next slide. Next slide, please. Now, I'll start with the case studies. Case study one is Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. We have our own method of donation, which we call straightforward donation request, especially the 2 billion naira donation to build hostels by Dangote and Bua. When we mean straightforward donation, maybe actually Dangote was at our convocation, and then VC actually on a tete-a-tete told him he has needs for hostels. And Dangote agreed to build a hostel for students, and it's one of the largest hostels now in a new area on campus. And based on that straightforward donation request, BUA, that is Isiaka Rabiu, the mogul of cement industry, felt he too should also assist Ahmadu Bello University. So while the Dangote project has been completed, BUA's project, another set of hostels is being built right now. So this method is what we call straightforward donation request. Case study 2, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. This kind of donation was inspired by an old student of the university in the person of Peter Obi. And he proposed actually raising funds for 5 billion naira. And the way he planned it is like each year, a group of alumni will donate 1 billion and maybe taxing each member with 200,000 naira. So that's the method he used, and he's still raising money for the institution. I think Professor Bartho Okolo can even say something more about that since he's within the university. The case study 2 is old student inspired, while the first one is straightforward donation request. Next slide, please. Case studies. Next slide. Yeah. Case study 3 is the Yobe State Government 25 billion naira appeal fund for the revitalization of education in that state. As you're aware, this is a place that is having frequent insurgency attacks. At the beginning, schools were closed. Children were scared to go to school. Parents were not taking children to school. Now, with things becoming normal, the state government actually launched an appeal fund with the largest donation coming from Dahiru Mangal. We have also the Nigeria Governors Forum. We have Aliko Dangote also, and Rabiu Abdul Samad. That's the same man we mentioned for ABU. And the target is to raise 25 billion naira to revitalize education in the war-torn Yobe state. And I think what the committee, they had a committee, and what the committee did was to register a company for this revitalization, given the program specific targets, timelines, and they even got approval from the Corporate Affairs Commission of Nigeria to embark on this project, because this is a very big project. 25 billion naira is a lot of money. So it is ongoing. Then case study 4, Federal Government College, Umuahia. I decided to use Federal Government College, Umuahia, because it is one of the oldest federal government colleges in Nigeria, and one that is rated as among the best, So the school, actually, the government took over the school, but they could not take it back to the old days of its glory. So what happened was the old boys met and they decided to launch an appeal fund. And I think their target was for 2.5 billion naira. And actually, this is almost 80% concluded. The school, which had been closed for some time for the renovation to take place, that's the transformation, will be open fully for academic studies sometime in September this year. So this is an interesting school, a famous school attended by Nigeria's very own Chinua Achebe, an international literary guru, Amadi, and also Ken Saro-Wiwa. So yes, this is inspired by the old students, and everything is going on. Next slide, please. Case study 5. The BBC Studio project is the one I was directly involved in, and it is funded by the BBC World Service Trust for public enlightenment programs, and 3 universities were selected to be the centers of journalism training to meet global standards. And so therefore, BBC World Service Trust saw the need for the establishment of community radios in universities. And I'm happy to say this is a success story. I was the coordinator of that project for 10 years. We got our license, we got the training components, the equipment, and in this studio on Ahmadu Bello University campus, we train students to, we train multi-skilled students, that is students who are ready for the job market using this intervention by the BBC. But however, the 3 universities selected, I don't know, for some policy reasons, it was only ABU that was able to start. The others did not materialize. So the studio projects have metamorphosed into a campus FM, and our students are doing very well, on IT, because you find out when we go to see them during the IT, you discover that students who went through this studio project were rated among the best because they had the hands-on practical training from this BBC studio project. Though there were other problems, and the problem is that other schools could not start their own project. So when the BBC left, I think their contract ended just as we were about to commence, but then other schools could not benefit from that. So that is the main problem for this case study. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to look at challenges of fundraiser in Nigeria. And believe me, challenge number 1 is weak alumni networks. We do not really have a database for our alumni. It is when we want to launch an appeal fund or a fundraiser, we start looking for the class reps of those sets to now gather people, So the main problem is weak alumni networks. This is the main problem for Nigeria. And number 2 is the lack of alumni database. And number 3 is lack of complete funding. Sometimes a project will start and midway, the donors will just disappear or leave for some other strange reasons. Then we have lack of community participation, because when a university is trying to organize a fundraiser, you should involve the community. And I think the main problem is the communities are not really invited or included in the participation. Next slide. Next slide, please. Challenge 2 Getting the theme and reason for the fundraiser correct. Usually people in the committee of fundraising used to have disagreement amongst themselves, which sometimes affects the fundraising. So, and the main area where they have problem is getting the theme and the reason for the fundraiser. It has to be correct. Another challenge is agreement across all stakeholders. Like Professor Okolo said, some people may want assuming somebody builds a hostel and he wants that hostel to be named after him or her, but the school may have another idea. So these are some of the problems among the stakeholders. Next slide. Challenge 3, lack or weak after fundraiser relationship management. I think John talked a lot about that. He took his time to explain that after, it doesn't just end after the fundraiser. You should maintain a contact, you know. There should be follow-up, briefing the people, giving them, telling them what you are using that donation for, you know. Possibly he talked about magazine or a newsletter, you know, highlighting some of the projects the funds were used for. I think that is also very good, just to make the fund, the donors know that, yes, this money was not squandered. We used it for so and so. You have to tell them what you use the money for. Then also there's the problem of personality, identity, ego. And that is clashes between the members in the committee for the fundraiser, and this borders on ego, sometimes personality differences, and maybe tribe, religion, etc. So these are some of the challenges affecting fundraising in higher institutions in Nigeria. So next slide, please. Conclusion. Fundraiser is a strategy for complementing official funds deficit for school management. And the second one is Alumni Old Student Association is a very strong platform for raising funds, especially in Nigeria. Then we also have the third one, clash of vision, responsibility, and community and commitment. Sometimes ruin fundraiser in Nigeria, which I've given you some examples, and other speakers have spoken extensively about that. Next slide. Recommendations. School management and the government should develop a responsive national fundraiser policy. There is need for advocacy, maybe to the National Assembly, you know, to have a responsive national fundraiser policy. It is very, very necessary. The next one, schools should build and maintain strong and responsive alumni association. Let the old alumni run the association without interference, you know. And then the third one and the last is schools and stakeholders should develop and maintain clear vision and commitment for fundraiser in Nigeria education. Next slide. Next slide, please. That should be the exercise. Yeah, I gave some exercises. And the first one is define fundraiser using your understanding of the concept of fundraising. Mention two, and briefly explain the possible forms of fundraiser. Three, mention a particular thing about fundraiser for education in Nigeria and explain how such peculiarity could be improved to develop fundraiser for education in that country, whichever country you belong to, especially let it be geared towards using multimedia platforms, you know, because the more multimedia platforms you have, the more ways you can solve the issue of fundraising. That is using the internet and other several platforms. And finally, I gave an exercise on explain how the new media has constituted another avenue for fundraiser for education and suggest how developing nations such as Nigeria can benefit from this. So I encourage you to send in your questions, your remarks, and then I will see how I'll assist in some of the issues. So that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so very much, Professor Ladi Adamo. Thank you very much. As always, you've done justice again to your topic. We really want to appreciate you. I just want you to expatiate a little here where we are awaiting the participants to send their questions and the responses to the exercise you gave. You spoke about the BBC intervention and how your university took that to run some kind of campus radio. I think that was a good initiative because, again, there is a concept of social enterprise where people should not just depend on donations. If you could make your donations to now bring in more money for you, next time you will have fewer people you go to for fundraising. Is the campus radio still working in ABU?
It's working fine, reaching out to a very large audience, and it's serving the community very well. Yes. Apart from the
you're making some money through adverts.
You know, the campus FM has a rule. It's not meant for, it's not a commercial station. Campus FMs are not supposed to collect commercials, you know, paid commercials. But I know that some schools do that in order to, because running a campus FM is capital intensive. You require a lot of materials, you know, and maintenance of equipment and all that. But for us, the university is assisting greatly and the program is going on well. We have three components. The first thing the student, what we do is immediately we have 300 and 400 level students, you know, in the campus FM studio project. And the first point of contact is a daily meeting with the lecturer in charge. From there, the lecturer will give assignments. You either go out into the field to collect materials, or you go into the editing suite and to do some editing. We have an editing component, you know. Then and some of those materials like vox pops, and interviews, drama skits, and all those other things are also used in the campus FM. So the students are more like the ROM, their output is more like
Yeah.
the raw material for the campus FM.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
very much, Professor. It's a different experience in the Southwest here. There are quite a number of universities that are actually running commercials, and I think
Yes.
it's working. It's some other ways of making revenue. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
pick this question from Sanid Ahmed Yauta. Could you please unmute yourself, Sani Ahmed Yauta? There's a question for you, Professor Ladi Adamu. Then we'll go
Yeah.
straight to Professor Kibo and Professor Sassi for their papers. Sani
Yes.
Ahmed, could you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. My question goes like this. We, the new generation university, if I may put it that way, we have a serious challenge because from all your presentation, I can be able to see that alumni actually, contribute the most in terms of fundraising.
Yeah.
How do we track our alumni, and then how do we create that relationship so that they can be able to come together and see? And if there are funding, or if there are dues that they are supposed to pay, how do we enforce that so that we can be able to get something from them?
You said your school. Thank you. You said your school is a new generation university.
Relatively, yes, from 20.
Do you have alumni?
Yes, we do. We do.
Yes. If you have a good alumni, they should be able to know the problems of the school, what the school needs, like, providing, do you have a mass comm department?
No, we don't have that.
Okay. If you have, then maybe they may start by giving you some things like computers, in preparatory for a campus FM, things like that. Whether you have mass comm or not, every school needs to have a campus FM, So the alumni, if you have a weak alumni, the school will not achieve a lot. And I mentioned things that make weak alumni: ego, personality clash, ego, squabbles within the committee, differences, things like that. So if you are able to have a good alumni national chairman that can, live above some of these challenges, I think your school should be able to have a good alumni. But you have to, really, the school have to be concerned about the kind of people that occupy the various positions in the alumni. So that's a major step.
All right.
Yeah.
Actually,
thank you very much, Professor.
State universities, hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
As you know, state universities, we are battling seriously about lack of funding. And then we find this conference very interesting for us to learn how to do that. Mostly our source of funding just rally around, the little money we get from the state government. And then from the school fees, maybe some little amount of money from the school fees. And school fees is not considered to be a revenue because each and every item of a fee has its expenditure.
Yeah.
So there is nothing much coming from it. And looking at our population, of the university. So it's a serious challenge. Maybe some other times, now we can be able to, look at this and then give us the kind of an advice as a state-owned university. How do you really raise funds to make sure that you have given out a quality graduate output every day?
Yeah.
Let me just come in here quickly, Mr. Sani Ahmed Yauta. Luckily for you, if you just stay tuned, the next speaker will be doing justice to this concern of yours. And the last time he spoke, and I'm using it, thank you, Professor Ladi Adamu. You've done very well. I just want to quickly bring in Professor Charles Okibo and Dr. Kelly Sassi. Dr. Kelly Sassi is a professor of English and Education. She's also co-director of the Red River Valley Writing Project. She is from North Dakota University. And with her is Professor Charles Okibo, who is a professor emeritus from North Dakota University. he will be doing justice to some of the questions that many of us will have in mind. He is an institution himself. I'd like to see Professor Okigbo as somebody that's got an all-round experience in fundraising. At this point, I will bring on Dr. Kelly Sassi. You're welcome, Dr. Kelly Sassi.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I would love to share the screen for Professor Charles, if I may. I think another participant is sharing their screen right now, so
Yes,
I'm
and I
not
will
able
get her to stop sharing her screen shortly.
Okay.
Ugochi,
we're
do you
waiting,
want to
though,
stop
I just-
sharing your screen, Ugochi? Ugochi Okoro. Okay, thank you. Now you can go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to hear all of the excellent information so far in this webinar, and it's great to be with you today. I do want to, before Professor Charles starts, greet all of you in the Dakota language. Han mitakuyepe, ampeta de chante washdeya, iuskian nape chiusape. And that just means, hello, my relatives. I greet all of you with a good heart today. Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, thank you very much, Sally. It's our great pleasure to be with you again today to share some knowledge based on our experience of teaching grant writing, fundraising, and capital campaigns. We want to recognize that our partner, Elizabeth Betsy Birmingham, is here with us in spirit, even though not physically. She left NDSU some 6 years ago to be academic dean at Thunder Bay in Ontario, Canada. But she's still with us. In fact, the topic of our presentation came from her. And so even though she's not here physically, you can be rest assured she's with us in spirit, and we continue the discussions beyond today. Our presentation is titled Human Resources Needs in Fundraising, Capital Campaigns, and Proposal Writing. And so we'll be dealing with fundraising, which many of our presenters this afternoon, this morning, have explained in great detail. We'll also talk about capital campaigns, which is very fundamental to solving Nigeria's higher education problem. We can't continue to depend on the federal government, not even on the state governments. It's about time we involved alumni, philanthropists, foundations, communities, various other groups, as is the case in the US. And to do that, it's important for us to understand how to write proposals. And that's Kelly Sassi's special area. Kelly has written more than 35 proposals, all of them always funded. In her history of writing proposals, only once was it denied. And so you are in good hands today listening to Kelly. Give us some ideas on how we can make sure our proposals are always funded. Human resources are critical. If we don't have people, we can't do any of the things we've been talking to you today about. And therefore, it's important for us to identify the people we have to work with. And we will conclude by giving you some takeaways. The most important takeaway is for you to contact us. You are lucky that we are ready and willing to work with you, to guide you through the processes of writing grant proposals, designing and implementing fundraising and capital campaigns, and keeping in touch with both your donors and your prospective supporters. So let's move on to the next slide, and where we'll talk about effective fundraising. That fundraising requires you to go about looking for sources of support. The last time we talked with you, John Klocke told you that fundraising is not necessarily asking for money. Fundraising is friend fundraising is making friends of the people who will help you. And their help is not necessarily financial. In many cases, they will start to help you with ideas. They will start to discuss with you. They will want to identify the common areas they have with you, even before they write the first check. And usually the first check is in a small amount of money because they want to test you and know that you are reliable and you're a person of integrity, as Professor Okolo hinted. So fundraising must be effective. And for it to be effective, it means it is strategic. It is strategic because it's not accidental. You don't just wake up on a Monday morning and say, let's raise some funds and let's go to our alumni. There is a strategy to it that begins with your, first of all, identifying the problems that will be addressed with your funds when you raise them. Identifying the prospects that are most willing to give. John already told you, you can expect 80% of the money to be raised will come from only 20% of the prospects. These days, it's becoming less than 20%. In many cases, less than 10% will give you more than 90%. So it's not haphazard. It's not accidental. It requires a lot of planning. Let's move on to capital campaigns, because when fundraising is done well, it leads us to plan for effective capital campaigns. Capital campaigns are actually fundraising, but it's fundraising at a different level. It's at a very high level. You could see what is happening in UNN. You could see what is happening with ABU. University of Ibadan tried it about 12 years ago, targeting to raise 2 billion. So fundraising, when it becomes very huge and becomes strategic and is for a specific project like hostels in ABU or swimming pool at UNN or laboratories at Government College Umuahia, then you require a capital campaign. It's no longer just begging for 10,000 naira or 50,000 naira. It is now asking for 100 million naira, or in some cases, billions of naira. And that requires you to identify the prospects, the people who will give you, particularly what we call major donors. No capital campaign is successful unless the major donors have come in to demonstrate why we call them major donors. My university here in North Dakota just completed the second capital campaign in our history. Our target was $500 million. By the time we ended it in December last year, we had raised $550 million, which means we raised $50 million, more than what we targeted. And that was possible because we had identified our major donors. The number one major donor and his wife, the couple gave us 75 million out of the 550 million that we raised. So major donors are critical. If you don't have them, you can't launch a successful capital campaign. Capital campaigns are unique because they run over a specific period of time, usually more than 3 years. In some cases, up to 7 years. And the first period is usually called the silent phase, during which we are just taking pledges and not even taking money. We're just asking people to pledge how much they will give us. And the second phase is now the open phase when we launch. Nigerians don't yet know how to do this. We come to a football field and we say we are launching a capital campaign. Usually it lasts for only 1 day. There was no silent phase during which we were reaching out to our major donors and taking pledges. That's the big difference between how we do it in the US and how we do it today in Nigeria. which is why there are many bad examples of capital campaigns in Nigeria. What Peter Obi is doing with UNN is an example of one of those bad ways to run a capital campaign. We never heard about the campaign being planned. All we had was one day when they were launching it. When they were launching it, there had been no pledges. Here in the US, we make sure we have about 60% of the target already pledged before we announce. So the only way we can get around and stop the bad practices of capital campaigns in Nigeria is for us to be strategic and to be professional about it. And the only way we can do that is what we are doing now, by bringing all of you together and sharing our knowledge and our experience and urging you to go ahead and try what we are telling you to do. Fortunately for us here today, I'm sure we have people from UNN and UNILAG. Professor Tejumaye, the head of Department of Mass Comm, is here with us. UNILAG Mass Comm should be at the forefront of trying to promote professional fundraising in Nigeria. So should UNN Mass Comm. Thank God Professor Okolo is here with us too. So at the end of this webinar, we're expecting great things from these two programs, UNILAG Mass Comm, UNN Mass Comm, to take our lessons forward and see how they can derive practical results from what we are saying. I will now hand over to Professor Kelly Sassi to give us a few things about grant and proposal writing. As I told you earlier, Kelly has not written a proposal that wasn't funded, except in only one situation. And so we can say she has her ways with winning proposals, and she will now share some of them, because grant writing and proposal writing are fundamental to doing fundraising and capital campaigns. We have to begin our fundraising and capital campaigns by writing proposals, by asking people to support us in what we are doing, usually to bring about positive social change. So Kelly, over to you before I come back to conclude. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Charles. I really appreciate it. Okay. So the number one thing that I would say is I can't tell you everything right now in the short amount of time course in grant and proposal writing. And much of what I learned from Dr. Birmingham, who Charles said is still with us in spirit, and that's definitely the case. So it really comes down to writing skills and understanding the genre of a grant proposal. And the way I usually go about it is I share a lot of successful grant proposals with people to look at, and for people to look at. And then I ask them what common characteristics they see in those grant proposals. They say that in order to write a poem, you should read 100 poems. And I would say to write a grant proposal, you should also read lots of grant proposals. And in general, they will have these parts to them, some kind of an introduction that gets the reader very excited about your particular project at your university or your organization. And then a setting of the context by showing that you understand the current situation and you have identified a problem or need. Then there's a section where you lay out your methodology or how your project plan will work. And what funders really like to see there is that you know what you're doing, that you have the capacity to carry out a successful project. And whereas in the case of one of the successful fundraising campaigns we heard about to build a building or to have a swimming pool, there's a tangible object. When we're working with human beings and we want to increase their capacity or point to a tangible object. So being able to describe persuasively the kinds of outcomes that you expect from your project, that is very important. And that connects to the next section, which is qualifications. Funders like to know that you have partnered with the right people. So every person who's been talking today has talked about the importance of collaboration. Professor Okolo talked about team building, you know, how we need to research donors and so forth. And hopefully under qualifications, you'll be listing some of those people on your team who are going to help you be successful at your project. Costs and benefits, of course, are something that a funder is going to want to see. And then in the conclusion, this is a place where many of my students struggle, is writing the conclusion, because they feel like they have said everything already. But the conclusion is the place where you sum it up in a convincing and persuasive way and make your ask clearly, so that the reader of your grant proposal should know exactly what they need to do to help you be successful. Now, you might be wondering why I have a picture of this lovely young woman, Nanye Chukwu, here. And I will tell you why. She was my high school student in Fairbanks. I was a high school teacher. And she was born in Nigeria. And she is a student who, was brilliant, first of all, but then really sharpened her writing skills in creative writing class, and to become a filmmaker in order to write and produce and shoot a film. You need to convince people to give you funding so that. And so what Nanye has done and applied them to fundraising to produce her films. So just wanted somebody to do this, starts early, and so the work that you do, improve their writing, can come back and become something that you can tap into. So right now in my proposal writing class,
Okay, looks like Kelly had some technical challenge. I'm gonna pull up her slides, and then Charles, maybe you can continue on from there if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay. And I will share. 1 second. Do you see it okay?
Yes. So
Okay.
you can move on to where she stopped.
Right here.
And then move on to the next slide.
Okay.
okay, I'm back.
Oh, she's back. Right. That's okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll just pick up where I left off, which is that those of us in education are uniquely positioned to leverage the person power where we are to help us write proposals so that we can get funding for various projects that we might want to work on. And go ahead and move me to the next slide, Gina. Thank you. That's fine. So the other thing that I want to say is it's helpful to think of grant proposal writers as change makers. So you not only are making change or money for your organization, but you're also making change in the world. And so by writing those successful grant proposals, you can maybe improve a problem that exists, identify a need. And doing that is really, for me, a starting point. I see there's a need in my community. For example, when I first arrived at NDSU, the president said, I would love to have more Native American students coming to campus, but I'm concerned that they don't have the writing skills to be successful here. So that's when I started studying Dakota language and waited for an invitation from Standing Rock Indian Reservation to work with the teachers there to improve the teaching specifically of argument writing, because at the university, argument writing is what we do a lot of. That led to a second successful grant proposal. And the reason the second one was successful to continue the work is that I collected and reported the data from that showed that this program was making a difference in the level of writing in the students. So what's important is not only to identify a problem, but also document it when you get your grant proposal. And then that's a cycle where you then can turn that into the next successful grant. The other thing I'll say is that writing grant proposals is really about understanding the rhetorical situation. So if we go back to Aristotle, his idea or definition of rhetoric is being able to say the right thing at the right time for the right audience. So understanding specific audiences is also extremely important. There's a lot of research to be done, as many of the presenters have been saying, in order to do that. Research not only on who you can work with, but also what is going on in the world. You need to show that you're up to date on the current situation. So for example, when I wrote the grant proposal to teach argument writing, I used the best researched, most effective program that was currently available to do that. And your funders will want to know that you've done your research and are using the best techniques. Can you put me on to the next slide, please? And back just one.
The next one, did you say?
Yeah,
No,
can you go back
Previous.
one?
It's
Please.
Oh,
previous.
back
Go
by
back.
one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right.
so just like other presenters have been saying, grant proposal writing is also strategic. So part of your strategy should be to highlight the intersections between your organization's goals and your
Right, Kelly, we've lost sound coming from your end. Okay, tech, she's gonna be right back.
and they wrote on their website, teamwork and indeed trust from our teaming partners have brought us this far. The foundation was born out of patriotic spirit to contribute to the welfare of children, youths, and women, and in its focus area to ensure healthy development among them. And then what I did is I looked up a list of the top 10 funding organizations for Nigeria. And one of the ones that I found was Bill and Melinda Gates, that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and maybe some of you have already received grants from them. And they write, we do all our work in Nigeria in collaboration with the government and other partners, all of whom we strive to engage in a spirit of trust. So when I look at what the nonprofit is saying they value, I see trust, and I see the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation also values trust. I also notice that they say that they believe in teaming, they have teaming partners, lots of partners, and the Gates Foundation also works in collaboration with partners. So if I were on this, the board of the Helper Social Development Foundation, and I had identified a grant that could be given from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I would be sure to emphasize trust and collaboration in the narrative of my grant proposal. That would give the foundation a sense that they see themselves and their values reflected in the organization seeking funding. So that's just a small and specific example of the kinds of rhetorical moves that I try to make when writing successful grant proposals. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but also Professor Okibo has a lot more to say, and so I'll hand it back over to him at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Kelly. Professor Okibo, over to you.
Okay, I'm ready. And I want to appreciate Kelly for being so practical. She came here to teach rhetorics, and she has moved on to becoming a specialist in grant writing. But we, like her, we always continue to learn. In fact, next week, she will be attending a professional orientation for grant writers to learn new ways of writing successful grants. And we have agreed with her that after her training, we'll try to provide an opportunity for her to share her experiences with us. And we hope UNILAG MassCom and UNN MassCom will be available to take advantage of some of this new knowledge. The common strand in all our presentations today is the need for people, and which is why we've titled our presentation, Human Resources Needs. We can't do fundraising, capital campaigns, grant writing alone. We need people, and we need all kinds of people, particularly staff members. We need people who are working with the universities, whether there are federal universities like ABU and UNN, or state universities where Sani Ahmed Yauta is. You all need people. Usually employees, because they have a more lasting arrangement, but also students, because they're always there. Even when ASU is on strike, we still have our students and we can continue to work with them. We also need alumni. Even state universities or new universities that don't have a huge alumni base must begin with what they have. Even parents have stakes in our universities. And so we should be able to go beyond our students and our alums and talk to the parents of our students and of our alums. Volunteers are critical. Professor Okolo hinted at this, that you can't depend on only your employees or your students or their parents. You need people who are committed to what you are doing, even though they are not alums. So you need volunteers, you need friends of the university. At the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, some of the most generous donors were not alums. Somebody like Ifeanyi Uba, Capital Oil, donated 700 million naira or pledged 700 million naira. I don't know how much of it he redeemed. And he wasn't an alum, wasn't a student, wasn't even parent of a student, but volunteered to assist. There are all kinds of donors, but we can't succeed unless we identify the 20% that John Klocke talked about. These days, it's coming down to less than 20%, maybe 10%. And for some campaigns, maybe just 1%. You must have major donors. And the reason why we call them major donors is because they give most of the money we get. And then there must be media people. We haven't had time to say enough about journalists. Very often what you know about institutions like ABU and UNN and UNILAG and state universities is not your personal experience with those institutions, but rather what the media say about them. And so it's important for us to know that media people are an important constituency that should be on our side. If you don't cultivate them, they'll be looking out for only scandalous stories to tell about you. And so it's critical that you make friends with them. And then there are consultants. We believe at the end of this webinar series, many of you will know how to use consultants. We can't achieve much in life unless we work with consultants in any field, particularly in fundraising and capital campaigns, particularly in Nigeria, where we don't have a history of doing this well. But there are many people in the US, some of them in universities, others in nonprofit organizations, who make their living just consulting on fundraising, capital campaigns, grant writing. And so Nigerian universities and institutions must learn how to work with these consultants wherever they are. And then you, lecturers in communication, it's about time you became consultants in your own right. People like Professor Okolo, teaching public relations for the last 30 years, you should now know how to use your knowledge of public relations to be a consultant in fundraising and capital campaigns. Because how we're talking about here is using communication appropriately, deciding, as Kelly Sassy just told us, what is the message? What is the rhetorical situation? What is the problem being addressed? Who is my audience? And what channel do I use? These are all communication questions. And so Tejumaya in Unilag, there are people in your department who can, just with a little tweaking, become very effective fundraising and capital campaign consultants who will now train others to come after them. And then there are advisory board members. Our colleague, Elizabeth Birmingham, recommended that we dwell more on selecting advisory board members. It's important for you to know who will be our best board members. Professor Okolo hinted at this, that you have to select people of integrity, but they should have something to add. And then you'll be able to identify who else these people can bring on. Then there is need for you to know how to work with government regulators, because government regulators can throw a lot of sand into your gari if you don't cultivate and work with them well. And then there are other groups. There are other human resources, particularly international actors. In that regard, I could ask how many of you know who Mackenzie Scott is? Who is Mackenzie Scott? He happens to be the most generous woman today in the whole world. It's Jeff Bezos, the Amazon CEO. His former wife has given away $38 billion in the last 6 months. And her money giving is not limited to only the US. It's all over the world. And so there is no reason why Nigerian institutions should not have identified such international resources and tap into them. Kelly Sassy gave us the example of Bill and Melinda Gates. It's our job to find out who else is like Bill and Melinda Gates, that we are not knocking on their doors, so that we should knock on their own doors. Let's move on. We can talk more about human resources. And in that case, we would like to remind you, it's important for you to know how to identify the talents you need. And how do you do that? There is no textbook that tells you how to identify the resources you need. But it begins by scanning the environment, looking around you, reading newspapers, listening to what people are saying, watching the news, so that you can identify who gave to ABU. If you listen closely to Sandra Adamu's presentation, you can easily identify 3 possible prospects for you to keep in view. And then from those 3 possible prospects, you begin to enlarge your base. John Klocke told you, you require hundreds of prospective donors. That's true. But these hundreds of donors must start with the first one, P2B, and then who is next? Maybe Ifeanyi Uba, and who is next? Maybe Bua, the cement guy, and then who is next? Maybe Ato Eze, and who is next? So gradually you build your database, but it begins with you selecting who are the best prospects, who should be in our major donor database. And then there is something we call Snowball Technique. Snowball Technique, as in survey research, means that selected one person, we can ask that person, who do you think is like you that we should be talking to? So they recommend people you should talk to. That's what we call the Snowball Technique. And even those people who are recommended can also be asked, who again do you think is like you that we can approach? If you use this approach, before you know it, you have a large enough database. No matter how big or how small your database is, it's important for you to qualify them. Qualify them for capacity. How many of them can give at this level? Qualify them also for emotional engagement. By emotional engagement, we mean that not everybody with money will give you when you ask them. They must be emotionally engaged with your brand. They must be able to identify with UNN or with ABU or with UI. So emotional engagement is critical, but it's not enough because there are people who will want to identify with you, but they don't have the liquidity. They don't have the capacity to give. So qualification is critical. Qualification on their capacity to give, they have money. And then emotional engagement, they share our values. Let's move on. We can conclude by identifying 4 takeaways from our brief presentation today, talking about fundraising, capital campaigns, and proposal writing from the perspective of people, because all these 3 activities require people who are committed, who are trained, and who are passionate about this. Professor Okolo referred to this repeatedly. People must have a passion, not just for the institution, but for the projects you are asking for money. And so it's not just people as one bodies, but people of capacity who are engaged with us emotionally. So our 4 takeaways, Kelly and I agreed on these, that success and failure start and end with people. Professor Okolo will identify with this too. If you don't have good people, you can't achieve any of your noble goals. Success, it begins with people. Failing also begins with people, because you have to identify when there is sabotage and when you have to refresh your team and when you have to evaluate your success and know why you are not performing at the level you expected. Again, we agree that success and failure are not inevitable. They are not given. It's possible for us to change our failure profile. We've been failing in the last 6 months, in the last 1 year. We can tweak our project. We can do certain things to succeed. Or we are succeeding at a level. We can emphasize certain things and then we will succeed at a higher level. So success and failure, not inevitable. If you don't do well, you are going to fail. But if you are failing, you can change and begin to succeed. If you listen carefully to Kelly Sassy, you will agree that successful grant proposals are fruits of research. You have to know what the problem is. You have to know what kind of change you are hoping to make with the funding you are asking for. You have to know who to ask for, and you have to know when to ask. All these things require you to do research. And then we can also add that research and experience have shown us why many proposals fail. There are many failed proposals. In fact, research shows that only 1 out of 8 proposals will get funded. That's 12% success rate. Only 1 out of 8, unless you are like Kelly Sassy, who has hardly ever failed. But if you are like the rest of us, you can expect that you should write 8 proposals to have 1 accepted. What does that tell us? We should persevere, even when we are failing. We should keep writing and sending them out, because you never know when the successful one will come. Many of the reasons why proposals fail are lack of adequate research, not having enough intelligence to know when to ask, whom to ask, and what projects to emphasize, because money is not given for everything or for anything. Even donors are particular about what they want to fund. And then there are many rushed responses. We don't do our homework. We are in a hurry, very often because we didn't see the request for proposals early enough. You have only 2 days to submit your proposal. And therefore, you do what you believe is not even a good job because you didn't have enough time. Let's move on to conclude by talking about call to action, what we want you to do, the call to action. I think we've been very clear about what you need to do to start a fundraising campaign, what you need to do to start thinking about the capital campaign. Even if your university is not ready, it's for you to begin because you have the advantage of having listened to us and you know what can be done. A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with the first step. And that first step should be from you. It doesn't matter whether you're in the fundraising committee or the development committee of your university. Now that you have this knowledge, you should do something with it. You don't require much motivation for you to put up a one-page memo to your head of department or to your dean, if you are a head like Tejumaye, a one-page memo on what the university should be doing with regard to fundraising and capital campaigns, to do this professionally and strategically. You don't require anybody empowering you to do that. It's for you to take the initiative and ask, because you now have more knowledge than the average person on your campus. So what do we want you to do? Immediately, not tomorrow, we would like you to contact one of us or write one and copy the others. Tell Tosi, who is in Oyo, in Ibadan, but also in Lagos, that you heard what we said and you like to take this to the next step. Or you can write me, charles.okibo@ndsu.edu, and tell me you would like to hear more from us. Or Kelly Sassy, kelly.sassy@ndsu.edu. Or best of all, write to Professor Chinedu Mba using the Jackson's Professional Development Series at gmail.com or info@jspds.unn.ng. So it will be good for you to contact us using any of those email addresses so that we'll take you to the next level. Let's conclude now by giving you 2 pattern shots. The last slide, 2 pattern shots. Above all else, we want you to remember that there is no bad time for starting a fundraising and capital campaign. There is no bad time to start. But there is no better time than now, particularly in Nigeria. We can't always continue to go on strike like ASU. It's now like a recurring decimal. You can be sure there will be ASU strike after this ongoing ASU strike. And what is ASU asking for? They are asking for government to pay them what they promised, what the government promised 10 years ago. The same amount, without realizing that that amount is actually only 1/3 of what it used to be. Because what 100 naira bought 10 years ago, today you need more than 200 naira to buy the same thing. But ASU unknowingly still asking for that, which means in fact they're now asking for less than what they were promised. And the government doesn't even realize that, which is why it's dragging its feet in not meeting the expectations from ASU. So there is no better time than now for individuals like Professor Okolo at UNN, like Professor Tejumaye at Unilag, like Sani Ahmed Yauta. You didn't tell us what state university you're at, but wherever you are, there is no better time than now to start thinking about how can we raise more money than what we are getting from government. And then the second parting shot is that there are innumerable opportunities for successful proposals. You write proposals as individuals to get funding for your research, to get funding for your teaching, to get something for you are using your knowledge to address Nigeria's pressing problems, to get something for publicizing what your university is doing. So there are innumerable opportunities for successful proposals. You can send your proposals to philanthropic individuals in Nigeria. You can send them to foundations in Nigeria, Elumelu, T.Y. Danjuma, so many foundations in Nigeria. You don't have to wait for their RFPs before you respond. Send to them. At the word, they will say, no, we won't fund you. But you can write back to them and say, why won't you fund me? And they will tell you why. And now you know how to get around whatever reasons they gave you. So there are innumerable opportunities. State governments have money. You'll be mistaken if you think they are all broke. Even when they are broke, they know how to raise money for their problems. And so the two parting shots is that there is no better time than now, and there are opportunities out there. What will please us in the journalism Jacksonized professional development series is to hear 3 months from now, 6 months from now, how many of you have been able to use these things we talked about today to make a difference in your own personal lives and also in the programs of your departments or your faculties or your universities. It's very easy to hear these good lessons, but it's very easy for us not to do anything with what we've just learned. But it's important for us to keep reminding ourselves that there is no better time than now to engage in fundraising, capital campaigns, and grant writing. And the opportunities are innumerable. If there is enough interest, I'm sure I can persuade my colleague, Professor Kelly Sassy, to join me again in providing a special webinar on just grant writing alone. Because this is what it takes us 16 weeks of a semester to teach this to students, undergraduate and graduate. And so you can imagine that the 15 minutes we gave her today, it's not enough for her to just scratch the surface. But I'm sure I can appeal to her to make herself available to talk specifically on grant writing, particularly for Nigerian audiences. So on that note, on behalf of my colleague Kelly Sassy and our dear sister Elizabeth Birmingham, who is not here with us physically today, but with us in spirit, we all say thank you so much for listening, and we hope to hear from you.
Wow, 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 wow. What can I say, Professor Kibu? Thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sassy. Wow, that's like a crash course. What you've given us is gems so packaged and delivered under an hour. Thank you so very much, Professor Kibu. We'll take you up on the grant writing for sure. I'll speak with Professor Chidedumba. I'm sure we'll be looking forward to that. And on behalf of the many participants here, I think that is one area that many of them would want to glean knowledge. Professor Chidedumba, would you like to say one or two things here before we also ask the participants to make their contribution? But that was explosive. That was wonderful. Thank you, Professor Charles Kibo.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to the participants and thanks to our resource people. Again, my name is Chinedu. And just to add to what Professor Kibo said, we've identified that the campaign, capital campaigns and fundraising is both very important for us at this time, not just in this country, but just globally. And so, like he did say, JPDS is committed to professional and personal development. And so we're working with this team of consultants to come up with at least a 6-week program for serious people who are interested in learning how to get into fundraising, capital campaigns, grant proposal writing, who want to really put their heart into it and train themselves and also go further to train others. So it's all about capacity building. So stay tuned. We will be sending out further information on this for serious seekers, I would like to say. So Tosin, over to you, and thank you so much everyone for coming. Tosin, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Mba. The summary I take from Professor Okigbo, an ancient Chinese proverb says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. I think that goes to all our participants. What you do with this training in 5 years time, 10 years time, you look back, and I think you'll be glad you did attended this. You attended this training. So let me just leave it at this.
Sorry, Tosin. Sorry, one
Yes.
second, Tosin. Professor Adamo, I'd like to spotlight you, but your camera is off, so it's if you're available. But go ahead, Tosin.
I'm available.
Okay, good. So,
I'm
all right,
available.
let's.
I think what you've heard today is just a loaded package from John Klocke to Professor Bartholomew Okolo to Professor Sandra Adamo to Professor Sassi, who just what she's done is to inspire me to get into the unlimited potentials in grant writing. And the icing on the cake came from Professor Charles Okigbo, who has opened our eyes to the unlimited possibilities out there. Thank you so very much, everyone. We want to appreciate you. We'll be reaching out to you via email on the next step we'll be taking. I think for today, we've had a wonderful time. Thank you, Professor Bartholomew Okolo. Thank you, Professor Sandra. Thank you, Professor Sassi. Thank you. I think John Klocke is gone. Thank you, John Klocke. Thank you so very much, Professor Okigbo. That was wonderful. And I want to especially appreciate Professor Okolo, who has been very patient and has been around, and many other people who came on board. Thank you. We hope to see you some other time. Bye for now.
Bye.
All right, thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Me too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.